Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you very much for joining us today for this WASH Basins IWRM webinar. My name is Vera Ngossi, and I'm a mechanical engineer and project manager on this project for Arup. Together with our partners, Frank Water, Sam Earth, and People Science Institute, we're very excited to share with you today the toolkit and mobile application that we have developed through our work in India over the last 3 years. These tools aim to support communities, NGOs, and government agencies to develop accurate assessments of water situations in a given area and use this to provide safe, sustainable, and equitable water and sanitation for the world's most marginalized communities. The slides and a recording of this webinar will be made available on the Frank Water WASH Basins webpage, shown at the bottom of this slide. Where you'll also find the toolkit and a link to the mobile application that we're about to walk you through. A bit of housekeeping. We'd love to hear from you throughout this webinar. We encourage you to post questions. On the right-hand side of your screen, you should have a question and answer box. Please feel free to put questions in this as we go along. We've set aside 15 minutes at the end where we're going to discuss and respond to your questions. With us today, we have Philip Songa, who's Arup Water Resources Specialist, John Shepherd, Frank Water's Head of Programs and Funding, Pravina Sridhar, who is Frank Water's India Program Coordinator, Hamish Hay, Civil Engineer, and who's worked for both Arup and Frank Water, and Palash Agrawal, who's Sam Earth Technical Expert. Without further ado, I shall hand over to Philip, who will begin by giving you an introduction to Arup and the WASH Basins project. Over to you, Philip.
Thank you, Vera. Good day wherever you are in the world, and thank you for joining us. I'm a senior water resources engineer at Arup, and I'm based in the UK office, working out of Leeds. And I've been involved with the WASH Basins project for the last 2 and a bit years. A little bit about Arup. We are a multidisciplinary global consultancy working in the built environment, but also providing knowledge and expertise and services across the water cycle. Our mission is to shape a better world, which is also reflected by our internal community engagement program. That community engagement program allows us to co-develop ideas with potential solutions to global impact problems, water being one of them. And we work alongside communities to improve their lives, especially those that are most vulnerable and marginalized, while tackling systemic challenges. So the WASH Basins project is part of our community engagement project, specifically a one that we call a global challenge set of projects, which are looking at key problems that we face in water and sanitation and energy. And WASH Basins is one of those projects. And as part of this project, we worked with Frank Water and 2 NGOs, which John will talk about in a minute, working in India, helping to deliver water and sanitation services to those in most in need, but at the same time taking the learning from that and trying to develop it into a set of tools that can help others working in India and hopefully elsewhere in the world. With that, I'll pass you on to John for the introduction to Frank Water and the rest of our partners.
Sorry, John, you're on mute.
Hi, I'm John. I'm the Head of Programs and Funding for Frank Water. And as Philip's just said, we've had a strategic partnership with Arup for the last 3 or 4 years. And prior to that, Frank Water was already working on the ideas of water management and looking at water supply and also water quality, actually. So Frank Water is a UK-based NGO. We work in partnership with NGOs in India and now Nepal, trying to move forward different areas of SDG 6. As I say, this particular project has been happening over the last 2 or 3 years, specifically focusing on IWRM, integrated water resource management, and how we can improve the knowledge base of water management within local workers, government workers or NGO workers, particularly in India. But we also work on water quality. We've got projects ongoing with, for example, the University of West of England, looking at those sorts of areas. So that's Frank Water. Then we come to the 2 partners that we brought brought to this project, who are two of the top leading NGOs in India, actually. First of all, Samath. Samath is an NGO based in Gujarat, which is, one of the leading NGOs in India when it comes to participatory groundwater management. They are essentially focusing very much on the idea of working with local government, and rather than funding any direct implementation of infrastructure, working on building water security plans, including IWRM in those plans, and then leveraging money from the government to pay for those plans. And over the last 4 or 5 years we've worked with them, they've leveraged over £1 million from the Indian government to install water infrastructure in both Gujarat and also in Chhattisgarh, where we are working with them at the moment. And then we come to the People's Science Institute, PSI. PSI is pretty much the leading institute, an NGO in India, on on fluoride and arsenic mitigation. What we've been doing over the last 3 or 4 years is working with PSI on how integrated water resources management can be used as a technique or a lens in the battle to look at water quality as well as water quantity. And some of the work we've done with them in Dar in Madhya Pradesh over the last 3 years is really groundbreaking work on how IWRM can be used in fluoride mitigation projects. So those are we're sort of the 4 organisations that have come together. Arup, very much the technical lead on IWRM. Frank Water is a central pin in this project. Samath and PSI is leading sort of NGOs in India. And between the 4 of us, we've basically worked on how IWRM can be broken down into stages and how that can then be used by local staff. So with no further ado, I'll pass you on to Pravina, who will now take you through a few more details of the project.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Pravina. I'm taking care of the India programs for Frank Water. I will be just running you through a very short set of slides on what is the context of the water crisis with respect to drinking water and sanitation in India. If you look at it, India is home to second largest number of people, population in the world. And we say that around 96% of urban areas have access to water, 85% of rural areas have access to water. But if you have to look at the numbers, around 163 million people in India, that is 19% of the world's population, who do not have access to drinking water, live in India. Of that, a huge number of them do not have access to safe drinking water. That is, the number of people who do not have access to safe drinking water is far more than the 163 million also. And it is not new to India, at least in the last 5 to 10 years, since the time I have started working in the drinking water and sanitation sector, the number of news articles on the scarcity of water during the summers has only gone high. And it's come to a point where there are news articles where you see people are fighting on the water pipeline, water supply lines, and there have been deaths due to water crisis in one of the southern cities of South India called Chennai. So the situation of water crisis in India is only getting graver. Next, Vera. And there are two basic problems to the whole thing, and it's to do with access, and the other one is to do with sustainability of the access that is provided to the citizens, be it drinking water and sanitation. The access issues, like if you see in this photo, there are long lines, there are a number of the access points are far less, and the supply timelines for the access during the dry seasons is like quite limited, and which leads to a lot of tension, social tension in the community. Sustainability aspect of it is like there are a lot of communities where you have pipelines and hand pumps and taps set up, but they're all going dry. And the reasons for these two is multifold. Vera, can you go to the next slide? The fact that water as a resource has not been looked at as a whole, and the capacity within the government to manage this water resource has been, capacities do not lie with the same agencies who are managing different aspects of water. Like to elaborate a little bit more about the fragmented administration of water resources, there are departments which look at water's industrial use, which lie within the Ministry of Commerce. There are departments which look at irrigation needs of water, which lie within the Agriculture Ministry. And there are departments which look at water's drinking water and household needs, and they lie within the Ministry of Drinking Water and Sanitation. And the very fact that the water is, looked at as a commodity which is treated differently based on its use has led to management of water which has not been sustainable in terms of augmentation of the resource or management of the resource, right? And the capacities of managing, water, when I say managing water, like water is renewable resource, yes, but you need to manage the source as well so that the sources don't dry. You need to ensure that the demand is managed well so that people are prudent in the usage of demand, right? And it's quite fragmented. And the departments which have different capacities are not doing the task which requires that particular capacity, right? And but right now the Indian government has been at it in the last 2 to 3 years to kind of look at water as a single resource. And therefore, they have come up with a new ministry called the Ministry of Jal Shakti, where they are looking at different aspects of water together. But before this ministry actually, arrives at managing this water as a single resource, it's going to be a while. So even if it were to be there has to be a certain paradigm of looking at water as a single resource. Next slide. So what has been the solution that traditionally we have come to arrive at, or we have understood, which will work when you have to manage water as a resource? This paradigm has existed for a while, integrated water resource management. It's not new. Many of us have heard of it. Many of us have heard different versions of it: integrated urban water management, integrated rural water management, integrated water resource management, and a whole lot of them. But there have been, whereas if you look a little bit closely on program implementations done by non-profits or governments, this paradigm never features in their way of thinking of managing the resource. Why has that been the case? To be very honest, this paradigm requires a certain amount of skill set for one to roll out this framework in developing programs in line with this framework. What are the skill sets? You got to be an engineer who understands water resources, watersheds, a mapping expert, a person who understands different elements of technicalities, hydrogeology, hydrography, streams, quantifying the water, different uses, all of those things. And these skill sets have, over a long period of time, been the reason why people have shied away from using it in reality while developing programs. This endeavor that we have come together as Frank Water, Arup, and our partners has been in quintessentially to try and break this gap between theory and practice of using something very fundamental and solving very critical problems like our water crisis. And I'm excited now to hand over this further to Philip, who will be sharing further on how we went about making IWRM accessible to rolling out water security programs, which ensure communities, remote communities, have programs implemented to meet their drinking water and sanitation needs. And once we leave, these structures remain serving these communities for decades to come. Over to you, Philip.
Thank you, Pravina. So in terms of the toolkit itself, it takes two forms. We're calling it the WASH Basins Toolkit, most of which is an interactive PDF file that you can download to your laptop, to your tablet, to your phone, to your computer. It's something that you can have in the office for reference, or you can take out into the field. But it also takes the form of an Android phone application. And we'll go through the details of this in a few minutes. The toolkit itself consists of background information, educational information on WASH and IWRM. The core part of the toolkit is what we're calling the 6-stage process, which we'll go through in a minute as well. And we'll also look at a sample stage out of those 6 stages, as well as some sample screenshots. Next slide, please. So when you download the toolkit from the Frank Water website, this is what you'll see. This is the cover of the interactive PDF. Next slide. And the structure of the PDF is shown on the left. You have a table of contents structured within 3 main sections. We have the background section, we have the tools and the process section, which is the 6-stage process, and we have the tools and workflow section. We also have some supporting information in the annexes. The background section, I've just got one page there to show you as an example. This is information on WASH for those that may be new or newish to it, and IWRM. So there's a number of pages there which whose aim is to provide background information for people that are new to these terms and this terminology, or who are trying to understand what each of these elements entails and how the two can come together, and why in the past maybe there hasn't been that much interaction between IWRM and WASH, and some of the reasons why. So there's a bit of a literature review here, which is meant to provide background information for those that may be new to it. If you know all of this and you just want to go straight into the using the toolkit, then if you click on the link that says the process, that will take you there. So next slide, please. And maybe just to emphasize that you don't have to go through all the sections, you just need to follow the sections as you need to use the toolkit. The other section that we are looking at now is what we call developing a workflow. And again, it's written very much in mind with people who haven't perhaps had the chance to set up their own processes for project delivery. And those processes will involve field work, they'll involve project management tools, they'll involve how you go about analysis and that sort of thing. So we provide a section that helps you to develop your workflow, gives you some ideas to develop your workflow, and you're welcome to adopt or adapt as many of these as you need to. We also provide reviews of software analysis packages for hydrology and hydrogeology. Because of the context that we're looking at, which is India and community-based, obviously cost is an issue. So we have gone through examples of software and analysis packages that are either provided free of charge, or provided at the sort of cost that many NGOs can afford in their budgets. And the third piece of information within that section is just conceptual diagrams. The examples there are hydrogeological conceptual diagrams, as well as, again, background information. So really, our understanding from working with Samarth and PSI is that you want to have a holistic view of the process, and it's not any good saying, you need to do A, B, C, D without providing at least a modicum of those tools for people to be able to use. So we've tried to do that in the toolkit. I do need to point out that, of course, it's not extensive. It's not an extensive sort of research literature type job, but it's meant to be that balance between providing the theoretical knowledge and the tools for you to be able to apply that reasonably quickly. Next slide, please. So hopefully you can see that circle of stages, which is the core of the toolkit, as I said earlier on. You go through stages that take you from the start of the project to the end of the project, and then to feedback and sharing of information. One of the drivers for the development of the toolkit is the SDG 6, particularly target 6.5, which is on integrated water resources management, and the extent to which countries are implementing IWRM. At the moment, India is not reporting on this, and one of the reasons is just because that information is not available. So we developed the toolkit in mind for the Indian context with that background in mind, but we also intend to develop it for further for other contexts, and I'm sure that will be a key element of what countries need to report. So stage 0 is really not, from our perspective, a core part of what we're proposing. It's a needs assessment, and that just recognizes that many NGOs, community-based organizations, even funders, governments, while doing their planning for water supply, will go through a process of needs assessment, and that process will vary from project to project, from organization to organization. So whatever needs assessment process you go through, we understand that there is a needs assessment which will provide some basic information on whether a project goes ahead or not and whether it gets funded or not. Where we start is once a project has been approved and the need is understood to some extent, and you're now starting to explore and develop that project further. So we propose starting with a reconnaissance visit, which you can call an initial site visit, to check out the community, to check out the local geography, to speak to the community, to understand from their own mouths the issues that they face and the problems that they face as well, and what they think the solutions are. So that is our starting point. We think you then need to take that information and synthesize it at a fairly high level into what we found in India is generally called an interim report. And really, again, that could be called whatever you want to call it. The idea is that you have some kind of structured bringing together of the needs assessment information, the reconnaissance information, and you're not trying to provide solutions at that point. You're trying to provide more context for the issues, both in terms of the wider water resources issues, availability, geographical context, climate change, meteorological changes, that sort of thing. And you're then deciding, you're then also understanding what the demands are, who uses what kind of, how much water, what quality of water, what are the problems, practical problems faced in that area. And you synthesize that into a bit of a forward plan. You can share that information with funders, that information could be shared with governments, it could just be used for planning. But by the time you move on to the next stage, which is stage 3, your detailed field visits, people that work in engineering, that work in technical projects out in the field, this is something you understand very well. And this is the point at which you're doing very detailed household surveys, very detailed surveys of water use, livelihood needs, very detailed surveys of the local watershed, and trying to understand the hydrology. So it will involve a mix of skills. It will involve both practical field work, measurements, maybe even pump tests and that sort of thing, or you know, field measurements. You could also at this point have many more community discussions to go into depth of the problems they're facing and some of the thinking that you're developing at this stage. The field visits, we say field visits because it won't be one, it will be something that occurs over a number of visits or a number of months. Again, what we're not doing is prescribing how long that takes. We're just helping you to understand how you prepare for that in terms of skills and in terms of the information that you need to collect. Then finally, not finally, but the next stage is stage 4, which is your mostly hydrogeological analysis and the synthesizing of technical information with socioeconomic information. This is where you start to, for example, if you've done pump tests, this is when you, on boreholes, this is when you are doing your analysis to understand the properties of the aquifer, of the groundwater holding rocks that you encountered in the area. This is when you're doing your concept diagrams to understand how deep you can drill, to understand maybe where there are issues with water quality beyond a certain depth. This is where you start to develop as well understanding of what solutions are going to work in one area versus another one. So you might have shallow wells in one area because of the characteristics of the groundwater in that area versus deep well boreholes, in another area. Again, the key thing is that you need to bring together information on the context, the water resources context, and we would advise as well that at this point you start to bring in information from outside the watershed or the catchment, and that is information from governments. In India, for example, the Central Groundwater Board produces a lot of maps. You have the India Water Tool, which also compiles a lot of this information. And it's helpful to bring that context together to be able to understand a lot better the watershed or the catchment or the aquifer that you're working in. So what does that lead on to? It leads on to a really critical process, which we call water balance assessment. What that is really is just you bringing together your supply information, having done the calculations to understand, say in this particular watershed, how much water does the catchment receive via rainfall or maybe via flows from another catchment upstream. How much recharge does the aquifer in this area gain, given the surface catchment and given the type of aquifer that it is, the transmissivity of the rocks. And then on the demand side, you're looking at what are the uses for water that people have, how much do they need for domestic uses at home per person per day, how much do they use for watering cattle, how much do they use for irrigation, but also who else is using water in this catchment. For example, are there industries, large industries, small scale industries? Are there other agriculture uses that we need to know about? And you bring all this information together. What type of crops are grown, for example, how much water do they need? You bring all this information into your supply demand balance, which looks at what's available on an annual basis, what's being taken out by demand on an annual basis, and therefore, are we using more water than is available? What's the relationship between the two? Are you going to be in deficit if there's more water needed than is available, or is there a surplus? There's more water available than is needed. So that helps you build a baseline water balance assessment, which you can then use for planning your project and also for planning going forward. Then finally, the sixth stage is what in India is usually called a detailed project report, can also be called a water security plan. And this brings together all the information that you've gathered, as well as the solutions that you're proposing, whether that is deep boreholes, whether that is check dams, whether that is surface water sources, the different water qualities, or which sources are you providing for cattle, for example, and which sources are you providing for domestic use, which sources are available for irrigation, all of that sort of thing. So that will come along with the costs of delivering the project, as well as who's responsible, who's involved, what's the role of the community, what's the role of the government, what are the timeframes within which this project is going to be delivered. So that's really where all the information on the project is saved. But coming out of that, we propose two feedback loops. One is to share information on water demand and water availability with regional and national governments, national agencies. As we say, this can help contribute to IWRM target 6.5, as well as regional and national agency data, which informs your project. So by doing these feedback loops, you're using the information that's out there to build your project and make it more sustainable, but you're also providing the information that you've gathered out back to those agencies and to those larger data sets to help inform future projects as well as other people's future projects. Next slide, please. So in terms of the 6-stage process, like I said, it's reflected exactly the same way in the app. It's exactly the same stages. So whether you're using the app or whether you're using the interactive PDF, you should be getting the same information. Next slide, please. And we see here an example of one of the stages. I've just picked out stage 4, but the structure is exactly the same. You usually have a purpose. What's the purpose of that stage? What's the purpose of the activities you're doing in that particular stage? Why are you collecting this information? And therefore, what outputs are you expecting? We also highlight what type of information you're collecting, whether that's technical, social, environmental, political information, as well as tools and ways of working. We give you some ideas of what sort of tools you'll need, what sort of software you'll need, what kind of analysis you'll need to be doing. We talk about the data inputs that you're likely to need at that stage, as well as a high-level overview of data sources. We should point out that these are typical, they are not extensive, and in some cases you'll have better information than this, so by all means, please use that. Next slide, please. So the second half of each stage then talks you through the tasks, and in this case we're talking about groundwater and surface water analysis, so it's split between the two. The kind of tasks that you'll be doing out in the field. So for example, your pump test data analysis here. You will also be looking at river and stream flow data series. And in addition, the tasks are linked to the skills that you'll require. So in this case, you require hydrology skills, hydrogeology skills, civil, mechanical engineering, or water resources assessment skills. And I know for a lot of NGOs, you won't necessarily have an individual to with each of these different skill sets. You might actually have one or two people who cut across all of those skill sets, and that's fine. The key thing is that these are the kind of skill sets that you're looking for. And then maybe one of the most exciting things of the toolkit is that we have developed some templates for people to use that we've made available. Some of you may have heard about the COBOL toolbox, which allows you to develop web-based survey forms, and we've developed some survey forms based on what Samarth in particular have been using out in the field, and we're making this available for people to use. You can get this with the toolkit when you download it. You can, if you've got a COBOL account, you can just click on the link. It will take you into your account, and you should be able to download the file to your account or save it to your account. You can also have a look at a PDF copy if you wanted. We've also, through the literature review, identified other tools, for example, the MyWell app, which has been in use in India for a couple of years. And we've also developed our own Excel templates for water level monitoring, for example, or for pump test analysis, which can make life a lot easier. All you need to do is just plug in the information that you've collected from the field. We also provide some links, as I said, to either free or low-cost software. GIS packages are a very big thing these days, and in moving to a digital workflow from a paper-based workflow, GIS is a critical part of that. Mostly for this toolkit, and you'll see the examples that come later on. We've used Buvan, but you could also use some of the softwares that are shown on there. And then we provide resources and further information for additional reading if you need that. Next slide, please. And then I think finally, just to illustrate some screenshots from the Android app, if you're looking for us on the Google Play site, it's WASH Connect IWRM that you're looking for. And like I said before, you have your three sections, your background, which is the second one on there. We've already seen the 6-stage process. So the third tab there is the COBOL forms, which again provides you links to those templates that I spoke about. And you can go in and out of the COBOL Collect app from our app and vice versa. And then the final two examples just show some of the background content within the app structure. So we've tried to provide not all, but most of the key information within the app as well. So you have that to hand. And I think that's a quick tour of the toolkit and the app. And I'll pass on to, we'll show you a very quick video, which my colleague Hamish will talk about, which shows how the app works.
Hi everyone, my name is Hamish. I'm an engineer and I've been working with WASH Basins since the project kicked off about 3 years ago. I'm really excited to introduce the WASH Connect app to you all today, which is designed to provide both expert advice in water resources management and to simplify your data collection and management processes in the field. The place to start is our website, frankwater.com/washbasins, where you can not only get a link straight to our app on the Google Play Store, but also download the full toolkit and other materials. When you first open the app, you need to first log in using a mobile number anywhere in the world. The app itself consists of 3 main parts: background information, the 6-stage process for water security, and finally, online forms that can be used for data collection. In both the background and the 6 stages tabs, the sections are treated as modules, which can be marked as complete, allowing you to track your progress. For example, in the background module, you can find definitions of WASH and some theoretical background behind IWRM. These modules have all been developed by leading experts in WASH and IWRM, and are a short summary of the information contained in the main toolkit. The next section, the 6 stages process for water security, is the core of WASH Basins and provides best practice guidance for running a project, from an initial site visit all the way through to stage 6, detailed project reporting. The process was developed through extensive work in the field with trusted partners, and is designed to simplify and harmonize your project workflow, eliminating duplication and wastage, and creating a robust virtual paper trail. Going into stage 4, groundwater and surface water analysis as an example, we can see that each stage includes the purpose of the stage, what outputs would be expected, tools and ways of working, inputs, sources, key tasks for practitioners, skills required, templates, useful links, and always a case study. Most of the stages have these useful templates. These are provided both in a basic Excel spreadsheet format and also as templates that can be used in the Kobo toolbox. Kobo is a suite of tools for field data collection, analysis and sharing, and is one of the core elements of WASH Connect. For example, this stage includes a link to an annual well monitoring form. Opening this link using Kobo allows you to edit, deploy, and complete this form directly from your mobile browser. The forms are designed to be simple, intuitive, and can be used by almost anyone. They also make it far easier to share, collect, and analyze data. Going back to the app, the final tab is a simple summary of all the forms available in all the stages, designed for quick access and deployment in the field. Kobo can eliminate paper-based workflows, transform data collection in the field, and allow organizations to far more easily analyze and share data with each other.
Hi everyone, thank you for watching. As Ravina mentioned at the beginning, our project really is about increasing access to safe water and sanitation, and also ensuring it's sustainable for the future using the principles of IWRM. And the app is part of this process of removing barriers to IWRM to ensure they're more useful for the ground. So we'd really like to know from you, would this add value to your work, and what are the barriers you experience now that we could help you overcome with this app? There's a question on the forum about, is this toolkit applicable beyond India? It was developed in the India context with extensive work in the field, but it's also designed to be applicable in many other contexts as well. This is something that we'd love people to try out as well in different contexts and feedback to us too. The app and toolkit itself are a compilation of a huge volume of useful information and expertise. And the idea is it wouldn't necessarily all be applicable to every project, but acts as a one-stop shop that you can dip into and make use of in your projects. Please keep your questions coming on the event Q&A, but I'm now really excited to hand over to my colleague Palash, who will talk about his practical experiences of using the app and the toolkit in India.
Hi, hello everyone. Where I can, yeah. Hello everyone. I'm Palash from Samad Charitable Trust, India. I will like to show what our condition before and after the app. So the collection for the data collection, time for the data collection is somewhat same for us before app and after in app condition. But we saved our time in data entry. Means for entering the data when we collect before app, we collect offline. That takes around 10 minutes. But in app, we are directly getting the data in the backend. So similarly in the water resource data collection also. So we are saving our time in data entry. When we talk in terms of accuracy, the accuracy level is more higher in the app as we are getting the data directly in the backend. So we get more accurate data. So there's no typing error from us. Yeah, next slide, please. We start our in field. We start with need assessment activity, that is entry point activity for us in any of the village. We do it with the participatory rural appraisal by mapping the resources available in the village or in the panchayat, and we do the need assessment also what they need there. So we do this. You can see in the photographs. Next. Then we go for the household survey. We collect the basic information related to the household, that how many numbers are, how many family members are there, and what they are drinking, what water requirement for daily uses, for drinking purpose and other purpose. So we collect all this basic information using the app. Similarly, we collect the information from the village and panchayat level, like we collect the information of uh, running surface water, static surface water, groundwater. Next slide, please, Vera. And we also collect the information of institutions. You can check the survey flow that we done through the Kobo. Means we collect all the information. That is the screenshot of the app. Next. Then what we face during the using of WASH Connect app is our community members are not fond of using smartphones. So number of training has been organized for them to for the for them to use of the app, and the guideline has been also prepared for them in the local language so that they can read it in the field when they get stuck. And we also the conversion of local unit means when we go in the community use different their kind of local units, and so we had prepared the guidelines for the conversion of local unit into a standard unit to make it standardized and to make the data more accurate. Next slide. After all the collection of the data from the app, we go for the geohydrological and hydrological survey analysis using the data collected from the app. Yeah, next. We using the Bhuvan portal, we make the different maps like a base map of the panchayat, groundwater prospect map, flow water map, and the drainage line map to identify the flow availability of water and the flow of water in that area. This has been done using the various GIS software like Google Earth Pro, Bhuvan portal that is available for India, and QGIS software. Yeah, next slide. After this, all this, we go for the field visit also, and we try to identify the needs as per the all the analysis. Then we go for the water balance calculation using the all the data collected. Then we get the data like what water we are getting from rain and how many water is requirement in that area and how much water we can save for that area. Yeah, next slide please. As per the requirement and the our water availability, we propose the plan, we make the plan and detail, we make the detailed project report for the implementation in the field, in which like how many wells inventory are required, how many plantations are required to cut off the soil erosion, plus to recharge the groundwater to stop the flow of water, like that. All that plan has been proposed for that area. Yeah, next. Similarly, while proposing all these structures, we go for their technicality also, that what that structure actually required, whether it will get successful or not. For that, we check everything in the ground using all the data collected. Like for the pond construction, we go for geohydrology in its inward area, water speed, and utility, what it will be used for, like that. All these points are taken under consideration before proposing it. Yeah, next. These are some photographs of implementation that has been done in the field through the government, and all that plan has been submitted to government for the implementation in the form of detailed project report of water security plan of that area, and that has been implemented through the help of government. Yeah, thank you everyone. Now I hand over to Veera for question and answer session.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of our presentation. I will now, I've seen a few questions have appeared in the question and answer box. So what I'm going to do now is read out a question and I'll pass it on to one of the presenters to give us the response on this. So I'm looking at a question come through from Oliver, who says, is wastewater and or pollution considered in the water balance assessment or other stages of the processes? So I'm going to hand over to Philip if you'd like to start on this.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Oliver. Yes, in terms of the water balance, you're looking at the water quality, so the quality of water that's available in the catchment and the aquifers, and therefore by extension, what is affecting that quality, and pollution may be one of the things that is affecting the quality of the water. So for example, or even naturally occurring minerals, for example fluoride, as John's mentioned, PSI work in areas with high fluoride, so they have to take that into account when they're proposing which water sources can be used for what water supplies. So fluoride sources, for example, will not be used for drinking, but they'll be used for washing and other none other uses that don't require you to drink that water. So that's the extent to which pollution wastewater would be considered. And of course, if there was wastewater that was affecting your source, you'd need to understand where that's coming from, and you probably need to deal with it. But we don't really do any specific assessments of wastewater and how much is produced and how to deal with it necessarily within the water balance.
Thank you very much, Philip. Next question, which I think John would be well placed to answer this. Is anyone else working on something similar to the WASH Basins Toolkit and or the app?
Yeah, well, our understanding is that we don't have people working on similar things. We understand that, like, particularly large NGOs and people like UNICEF obviously distribute knowledge across their whole global teams, and that some of that knowledge has been on water management and SDG 6.5. But we did an extensive literature review looking at who else has been developing work in this area, and what we mean by that is who else has been, really looking at SDG 6.5 and going, what exactly is it integrated water resource management? How is it that local NGOs can do this? How is it that local government workers in PHED departments, in public health departments or other departments, how is it that they're able to understand what integrated water resource management actually looks like on the ground? And we found that that wasn't existing, and that's why we really focused on this area. Obviously, there's a lot of, as Pravina said, there's been a lot of work on water management in India. You know, it's one of the leading countries in the world in water management. But currently, there is a need for this in India. So we're also aware that other people have got similar-ish tools. For example, the World Wildlife Fund have got a water risk tool, but those often rely, and there is an India water tool. But what those often do is they use sort of collated data to give you an understanding of what the latest risk analysis is for a particular district or a geographical area that you want to look at. This is a completely different. This is much more bottom up, which is where you would input the data into this tool, and from that you would have a good understanding of what's happening in the aquifer where you are working at the moment. So there are similar things going on, but nothing exactly like this. And there was a slide which seems to have disappeared where I was going to go into the next steps, but you know, if people are interested in partnering with us on this, then we're very interested in taking this to other parts of the world. That was one of the questions in the Q&A. We're very much interested in doing this. Particularly, we see an interest potentially in sub-Saharan Africa. I was on a call recently with a gentleman who's working on wetlands in West Kenya. You know, so there are many. We've also been interested in and talking about the idea of looking at flooding in Bihar. So we see this being applicable. IWRM is applicable all over the world for all sorts of problems. So yeah, definitely we see that some need for collaboration.
Moving on to the next question. So I think Pravina or Palash, one of you would be best placed to answer this. Did you face any challenges in adopting this toolkit for water security planning? Sorry, Pravina, you're on mute.
I think Palash was discussing this in detail yesterday. Palash, would you like to share your experience in adapting the tool?
Yes. The problem we faced first in adapting the tool is that community and community members, means our field team, was also not fond of using smartphones. So we first faced challenge on that. After that, we faced challenge with the community on asking the size or length of the any water resources, because they are not fond of standard units. They're known for their own local units. So we face challenge also there.
Thank you very much, Palash. Next question, I think Philip or Hamish. This question is from Oliver again. He says, I know this would vary based on location, context, and scope, but are there any indicative ideas of the cost and timescales of following this process, maybe based on minimum requirements? So yeah, over.
Okay, I can pick that up. I think Palash has given some estimates from someone's perspective of the amount of time they think they're saving in using the toolkit or in using the app. And I think we haven't got sort of sufficient data at this point in time to be able to give global numbers. But I think Palash's example shows that they're saving time in not having to enter data once they come back from the field. And depending on how many surveys you're doing or how efficient your team is, you know, that could be an even greater saving. I think the other point that Palash mentioned was efficiency, just in terms of accuracy of data and getting it right first time more than anything. So all of those are tangible things that perhaps over time we'll have a much more clear indication of across the board. But I think the key thing is there's evidence that it doesn't adversely affect your process. It doesn't make it worse. It makes it better or quicker or more efficient, but the extent to which that will happen will vary from organization to organization. We don't have a lot of indication on cost at this point in time, but I would expect that if you're saving time, then you're saving cost. So yeah, we'll see how things develop and hopefully can share more of this information. But we'd also like to hear from people that start to use it and that end up using it, and tell us your experiences, and we can understand that a bit better.
Thank you very much, Philip. Go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say that in terms of saving of time, yes, Palash spoke about it. There is a little bit of time, like effort that is needed in training people on certain simple aspects of how to go about the Kobo toolkit and other things. It saves a lot of money as well, because there are enough open source tools which can use data that comes out of using the app in planning. And usually we have seen that on projects, especially in the grassroots projects, there is a lot of expenditure on skilled human resources who are planners or civil engineers. The time and amount of number of people engaged for taking all the data collection and analysis forward usually is cut down in this. This is the experience. And with respect to satellite data, in India, we had access to free satellite data. But from a lot of Google Engine and other apps, Google Earth Engine apps or other such platforms, we are seeing that there are a lot of satellite imagery from Europe, which is available at 10-meter resolution for across the world to do such activities. So it definitely will be saving a lot of money. An organization usually would spend on high skill labor if they start using the app and integrating with open source tools. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Pravina. I'm aware time's getting away from us, so I'm going to take just 2 more questions before some closing remarks. And I wanted to say thank you for your questions. Keep them coming. And what we won't be able to answer in this question, we'll follow up with yourself. So if you can, again, if you're happy to get in touch, there's John Shepherd's email at the bottom of the screen there as well. But I'll just ask a couple of questions came in from Sarah, who says, does the app collate data on outcomes, and has the uptake been good so far? And what are the plans for getting the app used more widely? So in the first part of the question, does the app collate data on outcomes? I'll pass this one to Philip or Hamish on that. And second part of the question as well, to John yourself, I think you might be well placed for that. So Philip, does the app collect data on outcomes?
Does it collect data on app? The app is a tool that you can use to gather information. It then helps you to channel that information digitally into either the Kobo backend, which you can use for doing analysis, or for GIS ready information, or for other mapping ready information, or even for sharing. There are also a number of templates which allow you to do analysis based on Excel sheets. So outcomes themselves, other than the water balance, which is the main sort of outcome, the other outcomes are almost entirely up to you, what your needs might be and what you'd like to get out of it. So the water balance itself is the main outcome, and that's looking at the supply demand from your project perspective. But other outcomes, for example, who's using or how does our project interact with maybe the mine downstream? How does it impact the mine downstream? Or how does the irrigation that we do in this watershed, how does that affect somebody else elsewhere? And how does that affect the overall balance within the catchment or within the state? You can take that information and help it to inform whatever other outcomes you would like to see. And some of those outcomes, I'm saying, may link to other partners, governments, and like we mentioned at the beginning, it may also link into reporting on IWRM. So the app is there, and the toolkit are there to facilitate. The main outcomes are in providing you it's a platform for consistent data collection, sight of your water balance, but then the rest of the information can be used to support wider outcomes beyond your project and beyond what we've envisaged. I hope that answers your question.
Just to add to what Philip said as well, because the outcomes are often more evident in the long term, the idea is that by monitoring the outcomes in a consistent way, these success stories can be collated and used to advocate for locally rooted IWRM processes. So that's definitely part of what we want to do as the uptake of the app becomes more wide. by maintaining contact with users, end users that are using the app in different contexts.
Shall I come in then, Vera?
Yeah.
Just a very quick one. I would say on the outcomes and impacts, that there are still issues with SDG 6.5. If you're project managing or being involved in this area, you will realize that the improvement or impact of integrated water resource management is managed at a country level, and often people work at a district level or local level. So there was a piece of work, and Hamish, who's on this call, did some valiant work trying to adapt the SDG indicators to a local level, and it was proved quite problematic. So there's still work to be done on how you measure integrated water resource management at a district level, and we're very interested in that work and are pushing that forward. In terms of global update, I think that was what I was addressing, Vera. How are we going to expand it outside of India? I think that was one of the key questions I'm trying to address, and that essentially what we're looking for is partners who can help us in that process. We're already in early conversations with some, I don't want to mention them, but with larger sort of international organizations that do work in sub-Saharan Africa as well as in South Asia. What we're hoping to do is just develop a program of work where we can work with a partner to outreach there, and that would be outreach both in terms of water resource management, but generally in terms of SDG 6. Yeah, maybe I can come to the closing remarks shortly, or maybe I should do that now, Vera, but that's included in that. But essentially, we're looking for that in the next stage of the development of this project.
Thank you, John. Yeah, for those that probably need to get away, because I'm aware we've overrun by five minutes, if you can just give the closing remarks. And I'm happy to then, for those that would like to stay on, we can answer a couple more questions in the box below. But John, if there's any key messages you want to get out for those that have to leave at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, my key message at the moment is if you think this is an exciting, interesting project, and if you think that water resource management is a key part of the work you're doing, then get in touch with me. Because basically what we have here is an incredible opportunity to give that kind of knowledge to local workers in government or local NGO workers. So essentially, this really is taking something which is often held in head offices and giving it to local staff who are the ones who really need it. There's 3 parts of this project that we're looking to develop now. One, and they're on the screen, so you can read them yourself. I'm not going to read it out, but essentially, one is to develop the app to become really very user-friendly and applicable across the world. So if you turned it on in Uganda, it would then link up with satellite imagery in Uganda, which will be helpful. At the moment, it's linked to Bhuvan, which is particularly South Asian front. The second is that we showed this app to the national government of India, who were very excited by it and offered us an opportunity to become a supportive partner and said, please, would you go around the different states of India and talk to people about IWRM and this app and how it can be used. We don't, however, have any funding or a partner to do that. So if you think that would be interesting to you, then we're very interested in hearing from you. And the third is that we're hoping to update to make sure more people are uploading this and using it, and that may be a comms exercise, or it may be also with another large networking partner potentially. If you think you're that person, get in touch with me. So at the end of the thing, my name's John. The email at the bottom is jshepard@frankwater.com. Get in touch with me if you think you can be involved in this project. We'd be very excited to hear from you. That's it from me, Vera. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. So as I said, I'll take on 1 or 2 more questions for those that would like to remain on the line. One of the questions which I see Philip is responding to, this is a question from Animesh, who's asked, are the community-based data entry volunteers also involved in the data analysis part? And how do they use this data to improve community action on water management? Philip.
Thank you, Vera. Yes, I just typed a response. Yes, they can be involved, provided that they've been appropriately trained. I think Samath's example shows that they've got some people that work within the communities and are not necessarily hydrogeologists, but have been upskilled and received training in a minimum level of analysis to be able to identify aquifer types, rock types, and to be able to understand key elements of hydrogeology, which can tell you where's the best place to put a well and where to avoid putting a well. So yes, provided there is some training, you can use community volunteers. But I think we also find, for example, from PSI's example, is that they tend to have sort of trained hydrogeologists who do some of that work. So the key point is whoever does it needs to have the appropriate training. That's what I would say.
Thank you, Philip. I'll take one final question. Again, any other questions we will respond to after this event. This question is quite interesting from Anonymous. How does the process work for areas which are water excess in nature? Does it have provisions for flooding, waterlogging, and other problems in such areas?
Do you want me to go?
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, sure, okay. I think we are looking at water supply in particular, you know, community-based water supply, so your typical water, sanitation and hygiene projects. But the data that we're collecting for a watershed can tell you, for example, if a watershed has surplus water and that's available. It can tell you if you're in deficit. It can tell you if you get floods, that sort of thing in your local area, when those occur, and maybe even the extent to which they occur. So that information is useful for planning your water resources, because it can help you to, say, decide where to put check dams and therefore increase the availability of groundwater. But I don't see any reason why that same information can't be shared with, say, the organization that's in charge of flood management. And in fact, if you're planning on putting a check dam in, then it's advisable that you coordinate with whoever's dealing with flood management. So the information itself can be used for a number of approaches. I think it's dependent on what the information is and what that information is showing. So yes, that the process can be used to identify where you have excess water in nature. It doesn't have provisions for flooding, waterlogging per se, but that information is then available for you to share with those who are responsible for waterlogging and flooding.
Thank you very much, Philip. Thank you to all our speakers. Thank you, Philip, John, Pravina, Hamish, and Palash. And a massive thank you to everyone as well who's joined in on this call. As I mentioned, the slides and the recording will be made available on the Frank Water webpage, which is linked on the bottom of the slide. And again, please do go and download these tools, download the app, and do get in touch if you've got any questions or any or wanting to collaborate on this. But again, yeah, thank you very much to everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks, Freya.